Hello and welcome to the Action Network podcast, UFC betting preview. I'm your host, Sean Zerillo, joined today by Billy Ward to help break down this weekend's UFC 317 card, give your best bets, favorite underdogs, top props, and more for International Fight Week. And if you'd like to tell some of the bets that we discuss on today's show, make sure to find the clip click links both in the podcast and the video description, or go to actionnetwork.com/bet now. Apologies, all lost power this week. We are doing this over the phone, so we'll make sure to do our best to splice this in and make everything seamless for this episode, but do apologize for the technical difficulties. The main event, a featherweight title bout between lightweight title bout between former featherweight champion Ilia Topuria, coming in at minus 420 favorite against Charles Dobronx Oliveira at plus 330. Dobronx, former lightweight champion. This belt vacated by Islam Makhachev, who's going to go up to 170 pounds and fight Jack Della Maddalena. Fight heavily juiced to end inside the distance at minus 670, plus 520 to go to a decision. I like Topuria iterations to win inside the distance. Earlier in the fight, really funny tweet I saw from MMA Centel last night. Normally don't love the Centel accounts. I tend to have most of them muted across all sports, but report, Charles Oliveira reveals he plans to absorb a clean right hand early on to get a read on Ilia Topuria's power. It's funny because that's just what Charles looks like in every single one of his recent fights: the Dustin Poirier fight, the Justin Gaethje fight, the first Michael Chandler fight, just getting knocked down clean and hard early before eventually rallying back. But I do think Charles' durability is going to be in serious peril this weekend against Topuria, who we've already seen come up to 255 pounds and carry that power. Now that he's making a full-time division move and going up in weight, I think the added muscle is going to really help with Topuria, not to mention the speed and durability advantages he has as well. Now, Oliveira at a huge number, the most prolific finisher in promotional history, record 20 finishes, 16 by submissions, but he is a glass cannon defending strikes at just 49% compared to 64% for Topuria. And if these two are going to brawl it out quickly and fast, I think Topuria is much more likely to be standing at the end of it. Last point I want to mention before tossing it over to Billy, I do think Topuria's defensive grappling is probably, or his grappling game in general, probably the most underrated part of his skill set. This is a guy who came from a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu base. It was the first thing he trained, has leveled up his boxing to an unbelievable level throughout his MMA career. But I do think Oliveira unlikely to be able to take him down. The size advantage is worth noting. Oliveira 3 inches taller, 5-inch reach advantage, so he is the bigger man. But I do think Topuria has the big power advantage, the big durability advantage. And frankly, I would not be surprised if this fight ends on the first exchange. Similar to the Poirier knockdown, similar to the Gaethje and Chandler knockdowns, just without Charles getting up and recovering from said knockdown. So Billy, I know you like the underdog side of this fight. Where would you bet Oliveira down to? Why would you bet his money line as opposed to taking the inside the distance prop? Do you think he has a chance to win by decision if this fight extends? Because I do think the minute winning could ultimately be competitive. Topuria never generally pulls away on minutes. He's usually in competitive fights, and the power ends up proving the difference. So where's your price target on Charles, and what's your read on this fight?
Yeah, I got the underdog Charles Oliveira, Chucky Olives at plus 350. I think kind of anything north of plus 300, I'm interested. You pretty much answered the decision question for me. Oliveira's a little bit more active. I think he just does more things, where Topuria, big knockout power. Haven't really seen him in too many long fights. He went 5 rounds with Josh Emmett. Outside of that, not as much experience winning minutes down the stretch as Oliveira. The only thing I really disagree with your read on, because if I was betting Ilya, the unders make a ton of sense. My only pushback is I don't know that Charles Oliveira was actually hurt in too many or any of those exchanges, because he likes to play possum. The first time you clip him, he falls down because he wants you into his guard. He has, I think it's pretty safe to say, the best guard ever for MMA in UFC history, if not all of MMA. Extremely dangerous off his back, and he wants you to follow him down. If you don't and you do hurt him, he effectively gets a 10 count in MMA boxing style, which gives him a chance to recover. And if you do follow him down, you're putting yourself into trouble. I'm not sure that Topuria will have the restraint to solve that puzzle correctly. I mean, he's shown us that he's very, very good so far, but that is a tricky situation to deal with. And the only people who have really beat Charles Oliveira in the last decade or so are elite level wrestlers, not just grapplers, but he's lost to Armin Tsarukyan in a fight that could have gone either way, and Islam Makhachev. Topuria can grapple, and I don't think Oliveira totally wipes him on the ground. But is he going to push that kind of wrestling pace that those guys did against Charles Oliveira? I'm not sure. A striking fight against a bigger, taller guy is a little bit tricky. Topuria posted a picture with Kai Kara France where they look like they're the same weight class, and Kara France is
Mm.
fighting at flyweight. So that was an interesting thought. I'm not, supremely confident in him. Ilia Topuria is a more than rightful favorite, but plus 3.5 to 1 against one of the greatest, or 3.5 to 1 for one of the greatest lightweights of all time. Just a little bit disrespectful. And frankly, I want to be rooting for Charles Oliveira here. So, quarter unit sprinkle on plus 350 would take it down to plus 300.
The way I'm specifically betting this fight, I like Topuria same game parlayed with the unders. Under half a round is
Yeah.
plus 475, under 1.5 plus 130, under 2.5 minus 130. The under 3.5 I saw today north of minus 200. It was minus 190 last night. It was closer to minus 220 today. So I'd stick with the under half a round, 1.5 rounds, and 2.5 rounds. 2.5 you can get as low as minus 128. That seems like a pretty good number to me. It's probably the one I'll bet, the biggest of the three. The reason why I'm not betting Topuria round 1 KO or round 2 KO, which are plus 300 and plus 490 respectively, I think he's got enough of an ego where he might try to hunt a club and sub against Oliveira. It just, something strikes me about this guy, the aura, but also the ego, where it just feels like he would want to prove a point by trying to out grapple a guy who's a world-class grappler. Do you get any of what I'm saying with regard to the ego and Topuria maybe trying to prove a point, Billy?
Yeah, that is a tremendous point. I mean, he changed his name, if you ask him, from El Matador to the Spanish translation of the legend, declared himself a legend
Mm.
with 2 title wins. That is actually really sharp. I love that angle. I don't know that it'll work, and honestly, you saying that makes me feel better about my Oliveira bet, but from your standpoint, that 100% agree.
Yeah, I have a feeling he's going to try, especially if he gets a knockdown, that he's going to try to go for a club and sub rather than actually finishing the fight with strikes. I mean, who knows in the moment? Like
Yeah.
that may be his plan going in. Then you see red when you knock the guy down, or just try to finish the fight. But just thinking back, like you said, Charles playing possum. His like head movement on the ground against Chandler was like super awkward. There's some refs who would have stopped that fight because he kind of went face down. So yeah, should be a fun fight. I do think though, I actually think there's a distinct possibility that this one could end on the first exchange. If it doesn't, I do think it'll be competitive. Like you said, the strike differential for Topuria, the patience, the power does give him the advantage, but I think on volume, it'll be competitive. But if he does end this fight on the first exchange, I would not be shocked. It would be a very anticlimactic end to International Fight Week. But hopefully before that, the flyweight title bout between Alexander Pantoja and Kai Kara France provides a little bit more entertainment. Pantoja coming in here as a minus 235 favorite, Kai Kara France at plus 215. This fight is slight plus money to go to a decision of plus 105. It is minus 130 to end inside the distance. Billy, you'll have the breakdown up for this fight up on actionnetwork.com. You like the favorite Pantoja, but you like him in a same game parlay with the over 1.5 rounds. I'll give you the underdog. I'll give the argument for the underdog in a moment, but go ahead and tell me why you landed on Pantoja this weekend.
Yeah, I would actually have no problem structuring it similarly to how you're doing Topuria, where we progressively add, later rounds if you want to do stuff like that. Um, there's just something that really stood out for me stylistically for Pantoja, and that is Kai Kara France almost exclusively when he's getting back to his feet or defensive wrestling, he looks to hit switches. And for those that don't know, I'm going to poorly mime it, but you reach behind yourself and grab the inside of the leg of the person who's taking you down. It works really well most of the time, but Pantoja is probably the best back taker in the lighter weight classes right now. We saw Kai Kara France get Amir Albazi stuck on his back because Albazi adapted to that game plan and stuffed it the second time that he tried it. It worked once. Pantoja, super sharp, well studied, going to come in with a game plan. He is going to be hip to that being the main escape the Kai Kara France goes to. And if you know someone's going to do it, it's fairly easy to shut down. I think Pantoja can do that, and the wrestling pressure will just be too much. And also, this is a rematch, so Pantoja's got this feel before. He's felt Kara France's power. Pantoja won the second round on The Ultimate Fighter against Kara France without really landing a takedown or much ground control time. So I think the striking will be mostly competitive. Kara France has a huge power edge, but we've never really seen Pantoja dropped or hurt. Kara France also a little bit concerns with his durability. He's been knocked out a couple times. And given the nature of the rematch that Pantoja is hip to the stylistic moves that Kara France is going to use, I think it should be a pretty easy control-based win for Pantoja. So if you don't want the over 1.5 in the SGP, I like his point spread. The -5.5 is around the same odds. Anything like that with Pantoja, I don't think he's going to dominate Kara France. I'm very impressed with how Kara France has improved his grappling defense generally, but the way he goes about it is just a bad matchup against Pantoja of all people.
Yeah, all fair points, and I think your analysis regarding the switch on the get-ups and his likelihood of just being Matt returned from there, or Pantoja being able to get back and control the position in the scrambles, I think is probably super key. Just from my perspective, the market perspective, yeah. Pantoja is very popular this week. He's continued to gain popularity as a champion. May move up ultimately to 135. With another title fight win here, he's been encouraged to try to pursue a second belt if he's able to successfully defend the flyweight belt once again. I'm not sure if he's big enough to move up to 135. It is something you have suggested in the past, though. Potentially going up to fight Merab. But, just in terms of the pure stylistic matchup, Kai's first layer takedown defense has defended 88% of takedowns in the UFC, 44-50. I do think once he gets taken down, that is where he's going to run into trouble. If he's able to keep the fight standing, if he's able to deny those takedowns particularly early, he should have the striking advantage, outstriking his opponent by about 1.2 strikes per minute compared to 0.3. for Pantoja. So Pantoja is efficient, but he does eat a lot of clean head strikes. He likes to brawl. Defensive striking is not great. As a result, I don't think the optics are the best in his striking exchanges for the judges, but he's able to overcome that with superior grappling. He's spent 61% of his UFC fight time grappling compared to about 25% for Kai Kara France. So if this is able to be spent more in the grappling realm, obviously Pantoja should have the advantage. The more that Kai Kara France is able to deny the takedowns, the more it helps him. Relatively binary striker versus grappler fight. That said, I don't think either one is a particularly big finishing threat against the other. I do think Kara France has shown pretty good rear naked choke submission defense, and Pantoja is just historically durable relative to the division. That said, if you kept giving me 5-1, 6-1 on Pantoja's opponent to knock him out going forward at flyweight, I feel like it's going to happen eventually. He's 35 years old now. He has taken a ton of damage, obviously shown unbelievable durability, but Kara France has really good hand speed. It's not even the power so much as the precision and the speed of his strikes and his combinations that tends to put people down. I think he surprises people with the quickness of his hands. Sometimes I made his KO prop about plus 500. You can bet that down to about plus 550. I would poke it. I made his money line about plus 170, would play that small to plus 185, just a very binary fight. And I do think he has the potential to improve off of their first fight. But as Billy said, the switches, the get-ups for Kara France, if he does get taken down, I think that could ultimately be where the fight probably swings for Pantoja. Should be a fun fight, though. And I think we'll get pretty good betting action on both sides of this one, given Pantoja's increased popularity, but also the fact that flyweight fights are usually pretty close. This fight is around to pick him to go to a decision, and Kara France has been competitive with him in the past. Let's turn to our favorite underdogs for this weekend's card. We have a bunch of props and underdog kind of crossover here. So we'll sort of combine the favorite underdog section and the favorite prop section. We'll throw a little ad read in the middle. But we're going to talk about these fights individually in order to keep it very clear. Let's start with my favorite underdog this weekend, and that is Viviane Araújo at plus 210 against Tracy Cortez, coming in at minus 260. Taking the underdog in a fight that is heavily juiced to go to a decision, plus 6 or minus 600 to go to a decision. Vivi is 7 years older, and she does typically struggle with cardio after round one, but Cortez doesn't really push a pace whatsoever. Vivi's the bigger fighter. She has a 3-inch reach advantage. I think she pushes a higher output on the feet, lands 5.6 strikes per minute compared to 5 for Cortez at distance. Cortez is the more efficient striker, outlanding her opponents by more than half a strike per minute compared to Araújo, but I do think this should be close and competitive, particularly for the first 10 minutes. And these two shoot a similar number of takedowns. They grapple relatively similarly in terms of rate stats. Araujo, though, has the better takedown defense of the pair, and I think they're equally likely to get on top of one another and generate some control time. So give me Araujo at plus 210. I think she'll be the better fighter for the first 10 minutes. Cortez should be the better fighter for the final 5. Hopefully the judges give some weight to the work that Araujo does over the first half of the fight. Billy, any thoughts on Vivi against Tracy Cortez for this weekend?
Yeah, I didn't get to it, but just the classic system play. I mean, you and I have given out so many versions of lighter weight class or women's fights, underdogs, that by and large have worked out for us. So I'm 100% with you on that. Not one, I just have so many bets on this one. I didn't quite get there myself, but makes total sense.
Another dog play, Jonathan Diniz against Alvin Hines. Hines making his UFC debut in the heavyweight division. He had a couple of amateur fights in 2011 and 2012. Then he came back to the sport in 2022. So he hasn't really been fighting that long, undefeated in his MMA career, fought a bunch of times in LFA. He is the smaller man, 2 inches shorter, 5-inch reach discrepancy compared to Diniz, who's the better kickboxer. But I would imagine you think that Hines can wrestle him here. Diniz was controlled for 7 minutes and 14 seconds of a 10-minute fight against Marcin Tybura. Austin Lane controlled him for nearly an entire round, 4.5 minutes, and Carl Williams never really tried to grapple him when they fought in the Apex. As I said, Diniz the more dangerous kickboxer, but Hines coming in as a big underdog. Our producer, Matt, thought he looked kind of like Will Sasso. I thought he looks like Will Sasso playing Brock Lesnar in a biopic. Just a big boulder of a man. You think he's able to grapple Diniz and get him down?
I don't know that think is the right word. It might be more of a hope at this point, but at plus 270, I'm willing to hope. We're getting almost 3-1 odds here. So as best I can tell, he was a high school wrestler. I've really struggled to find, a picture of him in a singlet, where he went to college, anything like that.
I don't know if he can fit in a singlet, Billy. The man has a boulder for a chest. I don't think it would fit around him.
Yeah, probably not. Probably not these days, but 15 years ago or whatever. Just kind of a big, strong Midwestern dad who seems to be fighting on the weekends for fun while working his job as a union structural engineer with his union crest tattooed on him. Just seems like a great story, fun guy. And if you're gonna give him a matchup to make his UFC debut against an extremely one-dimensional kickboxer, it's probably the best one, because if Guzzi can land a takedown and lay on top of Diniz, he should coast to a victory here. He's probably going to get knocked out by the much superior and more dedicated overall athlete. But again, it's plus 3-1. His nickname's Guzzi. Seems like a lot of fun. This is not, my most confident or not a huge bet for me, but absolutely love rooting for Guzzi on the early prelims. And I genuinely wouldn't be shocked if he has just enough wrestling to coast to a somewhat boring but emotionally fun victory against Jonathan Diniz.
There's been a lot of sloppy heavyweight decisions in recent years. Heavyweight fights have gone to a decision north of 50% over the past 3 years. This fight is plus 280 to go to a decision. I projected it closer to plus 205, around 33%. You could alternatively bet Diniz by decision of plus 430 compared to a projected line of plus 280. Those are the two value bets on that fight for me. I think betting Hines to survive this fight to go a little bit longer could potentially be the value side. You are certainly betting into a lot of uncertainty there, but I do think that is where I projected value on this matchup. Prop I really like, or a couple props I really like, come in Terrence McKinney, who's minus 180 against Vyacheslav Borshev at plus 150 in the lightweight division. McKinney always live to finish his opponents early. He can wrestle proactively. He has 16 wins, 15 inside of round 1, good submission skills, and great power on the feet as well. But he is a massive glass cannon with no gas tank, and he tends to fold if his opponents survive that early storm. Slava has only defended takedowns, though, at a 43% clip. He is very likely to get taken down early here. He has also shown lessened durability as he continues to progress on his UFC run. So I think McKinney going to be dangerous and live to finish this fight in round 1, as he is against any opponent. But I do think this is a particularly good matchup for him to potentially find that finish. That said, if this fight extends past 5 minutes, if this fight extends past 3.5 or 4 minutes, I think Slava takes over. So I'd imagine we both like Slava live after round 1. Probably going to get a better price than you will on his pre-fight line. But I really like Slava to win in round 2 at plus 750, or to win in round 3 at 16-1. Billy, you were going potentially with the other side of this fight early, or you're just going to wait and live bet Borshev Do you have any interest in taking his money line at all pre-fight, or you're just going to wait for the live line?
Yeah, I'm personally waiting for the live bet. If you weren't going to be able to bet this live, and I'll talk about why this is especially tricky in a second, plus 150 or so on Slavokov, I think is fine as an underdog, just because he has been fairly durable. He still has no knockout losses, been dropped a couple times, but usually recovers, likes to brawl. Um, but yeah, the best way to play it by far is Borshev live. The problem is you can't even wait till the end of round one because McKinney's longest win in the UFC has been 2 minutes and 17 seconds, and he's been finished twice in the first round once it gets to that point. So if you wait to the end of round one, it might be over. You got to be really quick on it. You got to have, the props open as the fights are happening is as soon as McKinney has a big moment, takedown, knockdown, few strikes, whatever, you got to fire that Slava Claus live bet in right away because the comeback is imminent if it's going to happen at all. So it is a tricky spot to bet live. If it makes it to the end of round one, by all means, hammer Slava Claus. I think honestly, in a lot of ways, the likeliest finishes are McKinney in the first half of the first round, Slava Claus in the second. That is typically how T-Rex fights go. So be ready, or if you just need a little bit of action ahead of time, I like the plus 150 pre-fight, but would greatly prefer to be waiting live because we get some crazy numbers, when guys get dropped or taken down by Terrence McKinney.
Let's talk about a fight from a perspective this week that you're attacking on Underdog. The biggest favorite potentially in UFC history is Jacoby Smith coming in north of minus 2,500 against Nico Price in the welterweight division. Jacoby 2 inches shorter. Price has a 4-inch reach advantage as well, but Jacoby Smith wrestled at Oklahoma State. Price has defended takedowns at just a 52% clip in the UFC. And you can go yard all baseball season long with Underdog's Pick'em game. Underdog is one of the leading sports apps, and you can play now in your state. Millions of fans have already won billions making picks on Underdog. Will you be next? Play. All you have to do is download the app and choose whether a player will go higher or lower on one of their stats. You can choose from things like home runs, strikeouts, total bases, and so much more. And once your picks feel good, you can play with as little as $1. If you get everything right, you could win up to 1,000 times your money. And since we're talking UFC today, Billy, for this Jacoby Smith against Nico Price fight, what did you cook up on this matchup?
Fight is a strong word for what we're going to see here between these two men. I'm very grateful for Underdog for putting the time prop under Jacoby Smith and not under Nico Price because I'm going lower than 4.5 minutes fight time. Jacoby Smith very likely to pick up a first round finish here. And then along with that, Nico Price lower than 17.5 significant strikes. It's really hard to land a significant strikes if you're either unconscious or being taken down the whole time. And those are probably the two likeliest things to happen here to Nico Price. Has had issues with durability, been knocked out twice in his last 4 fights. Just getting fed to the Uber prospect in Jacoby Smith. He has big power on the feet, can definitely knock you out on the ground, and a multiple-time All-American wrestler. So this is a horrible matchup for Nico Price. I'm pretty sure he offended somebody at the UFC offices to even be here. But I like the way we're able to structure that on Underdog. They did a great job of putting this one together. And if you want to join in with me until this, you can download the Underdog app and sign up with promo code Action Network to unlock a special offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit. That's promo code Action Network. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, and 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply, void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. And in New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. And since Sean Zerillo is going through some technical difficulties, I will get us started on some of the prop/underdogs that we are looking at. One fight we're both interested in is Peyton Talbot taking on Felipe Lima. This is a huge market correction for Peyton Talbot. He was more than a minus 1,000 favorite in his last fight, got wrestled to death by Raoni Barcelos. Very disappointing upset. People kind of writing him off as fraud checked, all those things. But now he's taking on Felipe Lima in a much more stylistically appropriate matchup for Talbot. These guys are both strikers. They both like to trade on the feet. I think Talbot has the counter striking ability where he is able to counter the extreme aggression that Felipe Lima brings to the table. And it's just a huge overcorrection based on what we've seen Talbot priced at in the past. I have the full breakdown of this one coming this weekend. I have two bets on this one. My first one is on Peyton Talbot as an underdog at around plus 150. The other bet, I like the under 2.5, also around the same price. I've got that at plus 154. If these guys are trading on the feet, as I expect, I think Talbot will land the cleaner shots and win more of the minutes, but Lima is extremely dangerous and can land big strikes at any time. So half a unit on both of those. You win if either guy gets a knockout early. You profit if Talbot wins by any method, or ideally Talbot gets a finish in the first 2.5 rounds. You cash both bets. Sean, you're back with us. I know you have some interest in Felipe Lima versus Peyton Talbot. A little bit of a different angle. Tell me about what you got.
Yeah, some technical difficulties for your boy this week. My apologies. But Peyton Talbot, I think, is a value to win by decision of plus 470, 4 inches taller, 2-inch reach advantage. The market on Talbot has been fascinating because I thought in hindsight, the minus 175 line against Cameron Saman, an absolute steal, but then he came in as a minus 1250 favorite and lost Tony Barcelos. Now he's an underdog. And the underdog odds are almost reflective more of how he was priced against Saman than how he was priced against Barcelos. Lima, not the most proactive grappler. I do think he is the better all-around fighter. I prefer him as a prospect, given his well-rounded skill set. Frankly, I'm very high on Felipe Lima. I think he could be a future champion, if not a title challenger at a minimum. Would have thought the same about Peyton Talbot until his recent fight. That said, round 3, as Barcelos tired, he did rally, showed good volume in that third round, and Talbot is always going to have good volume in any of his fights, and I think he may have superior output compared to Lima, who is more of a finisher, carries big power, but I think as a result, he's a bit reliant on that power, and it's easy to forget given the third round finish. But Lima lost round 1 against Muhammad Naimov. Round 2 was very close before he finished him. I think he landed a couple takedowns against Miles John, so he showed that he can grapple, but he doesn't necessarily proactively grapple. And if he doesn't proactively grapple against Peyton Talbot, I think the volume is either going to be extremely close, if not favor Talbot. So yeah, give me Talbot by decision at plus 470, despite how high I am on Lima. I think that this fight goes all 15 minutes. It's going to be competitive, and it could be a potential split, and I'm happy to take the big plus money side of things. If you give me a minus 110, ask me which prospect do I think is better, I'd probably take Lima, but given the odds, I think I have to side with Talbot, and particularly Talbot by decision. I do make this fight minus 140 to go to a decision. The market odds are minus 150. So no bet for me on the GTD. That is where I'd lean. I know you lean to the under, but I do think if this fight does go 15 minutes, it's likelier that Talbot is the one seeing his hand raised, or I should say, I think a decision favors Talbot's chances. I think a finish favors Lima's chances, and I think it would likelier come via submission. Another fight that you like to end inside the distance, Philly, Gregory Robocop Rodriguez, about minus 192, which I think is fair value on his money line against Jack Hermanson at plus 160. This fight is minus 110 to end inside the distance, and Robocop is about plus 140 to win inside the distance. I projected his ITD line at plus 135. I make his money line minus 260. I would bet him up to minus 225. Jack is taller, is 2 inches taller. Robocop is 2 inches taller. Jack has the reach advantage, but Jack does not have the power to scare Robocop off of hurting him, off of pressuring him. He has good kicks, but I don't really think that's going to be much of a deterrent at distance. So Robocop should be able to get on the inside here, potentially hurt Jack, sub him. I doubt he's going to have much success wrestling because Hermanson has really good defensive wrestling, but I do think Robocop has a chance to hurt him and finish this fight early, and I know that's the angle that you like as well.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and Rodriguez is a very exciting fighter. Most of his fights end inside the distance, one way or the other, because he'll just stand there and brawl. Hermanson kind of the opposite. He has a way of kind of taking all the fun out of a lot of the matchups he finds himself in, unless he, gets into grappling exchanges. I think if there is any grappling, like if Hermanson gets clipped and goes for it, Rodriguez is the better grappler, not better wrestler, but his submission game is superior. Although Rodriguez was on the Brazilian national wrestling team, so it's not that he can't wrestle. He's just, I'd say, a step below Hermanson. I just think this is a fairly heavy favorite who typically gets finishes when he wins or gasses out late. much like you were saying with a decision favoring Talbot, which I agree with. If you told me this fight definitely ends inside the distance, I'd bet the house on HoboCop. Obviously, we don't know
Right.
that's the case, but at plus 140, I think it correlates really well. Again, pretty much the exact same thing you're saying with Peyton Talbot, but the inverse of that. So that is my angle on there. Not one of my favorite bets on the slate, but definitely a bet I will be making.
I would imagine his finish only money line is probably prohibitive, right? I
Huge.
didn't take a look at it, but
I looked
probably
at it
minus
earlier
100
and
or higher.
yeah, it was something crazy. I don't remember the exact numbers, but that was my first angle, and I was like, yeah, no way, that's not worth laying that kind of juice.
Yep. Another fight we want to talk to before we get to our best bets, and then we're going to have one other fight that we talk about after our best bets because it is one of the best fights on the card, Josh Van against Brandon Royval. We'll make sure to get to that fight before we sign off on the show. But Hyder Emil against Jose Delgado, another potential banger here because Emil just goes forward and swings bombs, but Delgado 2 inches taller, has a 4-inch reach advantage, and potentially most importantly, he's 8 years younger. Emil is 33, getting closer to his mid-30s, despite
35
the
for Emil.
undefeated 35, yeah, despite the undefeated record, despite the very aggressive fighting style, in phenomenal shape. But I'm not sure if he's going to be able to maintain that style forever, given the age and just given the cumulative damage he's likely to take fighting in that way. I've compared him. It's not the same exact style, but the tenacity, the aggression reminds me of Vanderlei Silva. It's the closest thing we have in terms of a guy just willing to go forward recklessly in 2025 in the UFC. But very popular pick this week, Hyder, north of 60% basically across every public projection, across betting percentages as well. I think Delgado is the ignored contrarian side here as the favorite. As I said, 2 inches taller, 4-inch reach advantage, but most importantly, the much younger man. And he's well trained coming from MMA labs. He just needs to survive the early storm. I'd play him small pre-fight on the money line, and I would look to add more live after round one. But I actually also like this fight to go to a decision at plus 170. I projected that closer to about plus 120. Obviously, it's correlated with Delgado weathering that early storm. So Delgado money line, small probably pre-fight. Delgado goes to decision, small pre-fight, and then I'd look to add Delgado live after round one. Billy, I believe you like the GTD in this fight as well. Is that correct?
I do for a couple of reasons. One, while Hyder Emil is old, he doesn't have an extensive fighting career. He had just 2 amateur fights, took a few years off, and then 11 as a pro. Never really even been hurt in any of those fights, from what I can tell. Certainly not in the UFC, probably not before. So, the age is up there, but the mileage is not bad on Hyder Emil. I agree with you. If he keeps doing this for a few more years, it's going to get pretty rough. Both guys actually have greater than 50% striking defense in their time in the UFC, despite being fairly aggressive. Most importantly for the goes to decision, though, both guys will mix in the occasional takedown. If they get clipped or their opponent gets too aggressive, they'll both throw one in there. They've also both shown that they're capable of being taken down. So this feels like a fight where one or both of them has some moments on the feet, and the other guy immediately at least pushes him against the fence, if not gets it all the way to the ground, recovers, and then, next round we're a little bit more tired, a little bit less power, and so on until we get to the end of the fight. I thought the goes to decision here would be like plus 110, plus 120, plus 172. I really like. That's a big price for that one. This is not one of the heavier weight classes we expect to get finished all the time. Neither guy has a history of being chinny at all, so pretty surprised that we're getting that number.
Yeah, definitely a big number, especially compared to the divisional average. About a 48% decision rate in through-round featherweight fights. So should be about, like you said, about plus 110 to plus 120 compared to the average for the division. Emil finishes fights more regularly than the divisional average, but I think at best this should be plus 140, plus 150, not plus 172. So yeah, definitely getting some extra juice there, given Emil's fighting style. Combined best bet this week on Beneil Dariush, co-signed best bet. Dariush did open closer to plus 130, I believe. Even money, he's now moved to minus money, getting close to minus 105. This fight is also plus 110 to go to a decision. I projected it north of 60% and minus 150 implied. So I like both Dariush and the fight to go to a decision. Now, these guys are both old, 36 years old. They have significant strike differential for their career, both by exactly 1 strike per minute at distance. Where they separate, I think Moicano is the better submission grappler, but Dariush the better wrestler, and likelier to get on top and hold position. He's the more proactive wrestler as well, averaging 3.7 takedowns for 5 minutes of distance compared to 2.1 for Moicano. And he spent more time controlling grappling positions, 82% of grappling time controlled by Dariush compared to 65% for Moicano. Both a little bit chinny, as I said, both getting into their mid to late 30s. I do favor Moicano down the stretch, and I favor his boxing as well. But I think Dariush is just likelier to get on top and hold position and generate damage from top position here as the better wrestler. So I like Dariush up to about minus 115, and then it goes to decision, as I said, at about a pick'em price or better, and you can get plus money currently. Billy, what's your read on this fight? What are your price targets? And then any other props you're considering aside from Dariush moneyline?
Yeah, I jumped on Dariush at plus 118 in my luck ratings, and this is why I published the early week article so I can quote these better prices when stuff moves like that. It's actually a fairly simple breakdown from me. Beneil Dariush is a very good fighter, very skilled, has a really hard time with guys who have big knockout power. His last two losses to Arman Tsarukyan and Charles Oliveira, both one-shot first-round knockouts. If you go way back, his last loss prior to that was 2018. Alex Hernandez knocked him out in 42 seconds. Got dropped by Edson Barbosa and knocked out. That is just what happens if he's going to lose. It's because the guy has huge one-hit power. Renato Moicano does not have that. He has one knockdown in the UFC, and it was when he was still a featherweight back in 2018. Coming up at lightweight, he can do attritional damage. He can accumulate, cuts and wounds and all that stuff over time. Not a guy going to hurt you with one shot. And you have to hurt Dariush with one shot because he's an elite wrestler, and he will take you down as soon as he gets hurt. Conversely, the people that beat Renato Moicano are the people that can take him down. Islam Makhachev, Rafael Dos Anjos are his two last losses. Both of those guys, good wrestlers, took him down. Dariush is the archetype of a fighter that beats Renato Moicano, and Renato Moicano is not the archetype of a fighter that beats Beneil Dariush. I am worried about Dariush's chin, but it's been a while since we've seen him fight. I hope that it gives him enough time to recover. I'm just not as worried about it in a fight with Moicano. I think I'd probably lay a little bit of juice on Dariush had I not got him at plus money, probably take him down to minus 115 or so. As far as props, I like, Dariush mixed with the over. If this gets finished fast, it is probably because Moicano got a knockout. Any iteration of late, the round 3 decision prop, SGPs with the over, anything along those lines would be my alternate angle on Dariush.
A couple of fights that we didn't get to before we get out of here with our UFC 317 preview. The first fight on the card, Chris Ewart against Jax McVay. I don't have any thoughts on, still waiting on more prop lines to open for this fight. McVay has beautiful hair. Aside from that, I don't have much analysis on this fight. Anything for you on Ewart against McVay?
Yeah, I got to look this up real quick. One of the beloved members of the Action Network Discord did a deep dive on some tape on these guys, and I want to make sure I credit the right person here. So, that would be our boy Gilligan in the Discord, who is fallen in love with McVay's tape. Says he has an excellent game plan, uses Muay Thai at range, and then initiate clinches with good jiu-jitsu when he gets in tight. I don't know that that's true. I had a hard time finding tape on McVay, but in solidarity with Gilligan's read and McVay now being plus money, I'm going to take a little sprinkle at it. I encourage everyone to join the Action Network Discord, where we have plenty of sharp people on there doing stuff like breaking down tape that Zerillo and I don't necessarily have time to get to.
Yeah, I love that. Great shout out there. Appreciate the boys in the Action Network Discord. Final fight I want to get to before we jump off for the day. Have to talk about Brandon Royval against Joshua Van. Banger in the flyweight division. Van is coming in here, though, on short notice, I believe, in place of Manel Kopp, who keeps pulling out of fights. It is a big step up in competition for Van. He fought, I believe, 3 weeks ago, so he's cutting weight for the second time in 3 weeks. Taking a step up in competition. Projections really like him this week. Royval tends to be the more popular pick, but I do lean the Royval direction considering the spot for Van. On a full camp, I think we agreed yesterday, on a full camp, we might be betting Van here. On short notice, having cut weight 3 weeks ago, even though he won that fight relatively clean against Bruno Silva, I think this could be a potential spot to live bet Royval, considering Van is usually the guy everybody's looking to live bet after round one. I think Royval could be the live bet spot after round one here. Both guys offer excellent volume, and frankly, Royval is like the opposite type of fighter that Van has been beating recently. Guys who tend to fade, after round one, guys who want to grapple him a little bit. Royval can keep up on the output, but he can also mix in some grappling of his own. And I think even more so to the live point, if Royval has not grappled in round one and it's a close and competitive round, or if he loses the round, I'm even more interested in live betting him, knowing that he may be saving the grappling in his back pocket down the stretch. I do show value on this fight to go to decision. I make it closer to minus 250. It is minus 200 currently, but this should be a very high-paced fight where both of them are swinging, throwing at high volume, and I think Royval has some submission upside in his game as well. So projections say Van, projections say GTD. I kind of lean Royval and under here. We're definitely going to be live betting him after round one. Either way, what's your pre-fight here, Reed Billy? And then I know you'll be joining on the live bet as well.
Yeah, we've discussed this one pretty extensively coming into this podcast. I am betting Josh Van pre-fight for two reasons. One is because with a full camp, I'd be very confident in him at this price. The second one is because what I really want here is to set up a situation where I don't care who wins and I've got an arbitrage and make money either way. I think the way to do that is Josh Van pre-fight, Brandon Royval after round one. You hit most of the salient points. The only other thing I would say, Royval has been in, I think, 3 or 4 consecutive 5-round fights. Guys tend to, modulate their pacing a little bit for those fights.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to switch that back to 3-round fight pace where you push it a little bit more early. We've seen a couple fighters struggle with that. Rose Namajunas, notably, when she came back to a 3-round fight, pretty slow going in the beginning of some of her fights. So that is something I think will favor the live angle on Brandon Royval. Fairly likely to lose the first round if he is, coasting. Van also has more knockout upside early, I believe, just with the tremendous volume of strikes he shows and his improving power. So for me, it is half a unit on Van pre-fight and then looking to get back live on Royval, hopefully at plus money, so we cash the ticket either way.
Yeah, and as I said, my projections would certainly recommend that as the value side of the fight as well. It does have Van closer to minus 130, minus 140 pre-fight. So I think laying a small Van ticket pre-fight and then trying to get Royval alive could be a good spot. Betting the GTD kind of leans into that angle as well. Maybe even Royval and an SGP with an over 1.5 or over 2.5 or just Royval by decision kind of leans into the Royval later angles as well. But that'll do it for a UFC betting preview for UFC 317. You can find more UFC betting content from both Billy and myself and our other action contributors on actionnetwork.com. And if you'd like to instantly tail some of the bets that we discussed on today's show, look for quick click links both in the podcast and the video description, or visit actionnetwork.com/bet now. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app and sign up for Action Pro for immediate access to expert picks and analysis. Best of luck with all your bets this weekend. Enjoy the violence. Thank you for listening. We'll see you back here in a couple weeks.